Welcome back, everyone. I just have a quick video for you today. I recently stumbled across the liquitex texture paints, and I've been using them on my bases, and I've been really surprised with how good they actually look. Here I've used the coarse texture paint for this early Imperial Roman to simulate a arid Mediterranean, almost desert-like climate. And as you can see, it has really subtle texture to it. It's very fine grains. So it's more to scale than your typical playground sand that you might mix with PVA glue. And it's a lot easier because it's just paint that you can just apply to a base, and you don't have to go through any more steps than that. And I've also been using this to simulate snow because the paint comes in kind of a bright white, and I've been adding it to some existing Viking bases that I've had, and it actually looks like a pretty realistic snow texture. And for me at least, snow textures are pretty hard to pull off, especially if you get the flock. They don't really look realistic, and so I'm really pleased to have found this. So I'm just going to show you how I've been using this paint for my basing, and especially if you're doing a large model count army, this is a really easy way to get some nice texture on your bases and hopefully be more in scale with your models. So sit back and here we go. So here is the coarse texture gel. As you can see, it's $9. You can get it cheaper at Hobby Lobby with the 40% off. So it's a pretty cheap basing material. And all we're going to do is I'm going to put a little bit on my wet palette, get an old brush, and I'm just going to apply it here to my base. And as you can see, it's a very kind of bright white paint. You can mix in pigments to it if you want to color it. I just paint it afterwards and it works fine. If your figure is on a base of any sort, you probably will have to give it several layers, as when it dries, the paint actually contracts a little down and it's not as thick as it looks when you first apply it once it dries. But as you can see, we're just putting it all around the base. We'll let it dry for an hour or two, and when we come back, we'll get a nice sand texture. And I kind of like the irregularities and the brush strokes when we put down the gel, but if you want to have a nice level surface, just take a putty tool and you could even out all those kind of irregularities in the texture paint. And if you're wanting to simulate a little bit more rough terrain, because again, the texture is very fine, you can add your typical playground sand on top of it, and it will sink into the liquitex paint and look pretty nice, pretty realistic, and a lot more to scale. These would kind of represent larger kind of boulders that a soldier might encounter while marching, unlike where if you just use regular sand, it's pretty much like they're walking on boulders at a 28mm scale. Here we go. I went and I primed it black, and I'm just gonna do a quick desert paint scheme, and I'm using like a Naples yellow. It's a nice dark mustard yellow, and I'm covering the base. I always use a color similar to this whenever I'm painting a desert terrain or a desert base. And then once my mustard color dries here, I'm going over it with a bone color and off-white and doing an overbrush. This isn't a dry brush. My paintbrush is in fact loaded with a lot of paint, and I'm just drawing it over all the texture to give it an easy highlight. And then finally I'm going in with some pure white with an actual dry brush, just hitting the highest sections of the texture, drawing them out, creating some contrast. And as you can see, it's very subtle. It's very subtle. Each of the little granules within this paint are very tiny. They're kind of along the lines of if you've ever used baking soda and super glue. So again, very nice looking effect with this paint. And here I'll show you how I used this on some pre-existing Viking models that I've had. So I want to get a little winter theme to these guys. So I just took this liquitex paint, and I just took the old brush and kind of just applied it in random areas on the foliage, on the dirt areas to simulate snow, maybe like a spring snow that's thawing. And I was really pleasantly surprised when this dried. Had a nice effect to it. So a nice easy snow base without having to deal with any flocks or anything like that. So here is my Victrix Roman again, and I'm really ecstatic about this paint for basing. I think I'm going to use it on most of my historical armies. It will really cut down on what I think is one of the more monotonous aspects of historical wargaming, basing hundreds and hundreds of models. It can take forever. This will probably halve the amount of time it will take for many of my models. So hopefully if you're like me, slogging through a large army, this will help you base them a little bit quicker, and also give this a try out for snow. It really is a nice texture. It looks pretty realistic as both sand or snow. So anyways, hope you got something from this video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, and I will see you all soon with my next video. Take care.